Well, changes to basic education laws are being considered by Parliamentary Committee. The amendments include giving sweeping powers to provincial education heads, and this will effectively remove the powers of school governing bodies. Well, government will be responsible for admission and language policies. Cosatu AfriForum, the Centre for Child Law, will make submissions as well today. So let's get Cosatu's view from Parliamentary Liason Officer Matthew Parks joining us, of course, this morning to take this conversation forward. And Matthew, thank you so much for your time this morning. Good morning to you. I mean, the oral submissions that you are, of course, tabling before Parliament, what do they include, especially pertaining to the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill?
Yeah. No, good morning. Look, there's some positive things there which we think are actually long overdue. For example, making grade R a required part of the school curriculum and that learners must attend school from grade R. We think that that's going to help lay a positive foundation to ensure learners are ready for grade 1. They have a better foundation to do well in school. There are other positive too about strengthening attendance requirements, make sure parents also take responsibility to ensure that children attend school. There are positive things, for example, around issues of security, that schools have the right to search learners, their possessions if they think they're carrying drugs, weapons, or alcohol. So those are some positive things. There's also some critical things which are long overdue. For example, having a stronger oversight role by the department around admissions criteria, so we don't see people being unfairly discriminated against and not admitted for wrong reasons. Similarly, on a diversity policy as well, because you've seen bizarre incidences in the past few years where learners are kicked out of school for wearing extensions or braids, silly things like that. So we think those are useful things because clearly we haven't dealt with them properly, and clearly we see some learners being punished as a result. So I think there's some useful things. There's some measures around accountability and financial transparency as well. So whilst welcoming those positive things, there are some areas we are concerned with as Cosatu. One is that it criminalizes any disruption of schooling. And because that's such a vague, open-ended provision, it would mean, in fact, that if teachers or education workers chose to exercise the constitutional right to picket or to protest or even to go on strike, that would, in fact, become a criminal offense. So that's simply unconstitutional. The Labour Relations Act does give provisions for picketing guidelines between the employer and the workers. So, for example, that you have to picket within 50 meters of a school premise, for example, that can be provided for, but you can't undermine the constitutional right to strike or to picket. We think there are also some issues there about the school mergers which are a little bit concerning, that the department often just takes a numbers focus to closing or merging of schools. For example, if there's too few learners, and that might make sense in a city where they have many alternatives available usually, but in farming communities and remote rural areas, we're always going to have very low learner numbers. So we think we need to take a more inclusive approach that also says, what are the geographical distances learners have to travel? Is scholar transport available? Because otherwise we will be disadvantaged in many rural areas.
Right. Matthew, with that being said, I mean, there's another part of the, Basic Education Amendment Bill that definitely got parents talking, got the country talking. It has to do with unisex bathrooms and also ensuring that, marks such as he or her, him or her, or even, the drawings that you find usually on bathrooms are scrapped, so we have more unisex bathrooms in our public schools. Parents lamenting, saying with the high rape, statistics in the country, is this really a good move? What is your stance as Cosatu with regards to that?
Look, our foundation as society, for all of us, must be the Constitution, which prohibits unfair discrimination based upon sex or gender. So our schools must reflect that inclusive ethos. And we do appreciate this is a bit of an evolving learning experience for the entire world, including South Africa. We have done well on many fronts, including the recognition of same-sex partnerships and marriages and so forth, that it can't discriminate against people. So we think the department would be correct, that we would need to have an inclusive approach, for example, to bathrooms. We would not want to see a horrific situation like you find in some parts of the world where persons who are transgender or transitioning, have different sexual orientations, are victimized, are bullied. So we need an inclusive approach that accommodates all learners. No one should be felt discriminated against or victimized. I think for us, the greatest crisis in schools around the issue of bathrooms is the lack of decent sanitation in many schools. We still have about 3,000 schools plus who lack decent sanitation. You have learners who still in rural areas of Limpopo have to go to the bush to relieve themselves. That's for us is the biggest crisis, to make sure all schools have decent sanitation. And then, in fact, there's enough toilets available for learners, because in schools you're dealing with sometimes 3,000 learners, quite a significant amount of staff, and you have very few decent toilets available for them.
Right. Just my last question to you before I let you go. I mean, regarding the attendance of grade Rs as a compulsory, class, also at the same status as a grade 1. I know alongside that, parents who don't ensure that their children do attend school will be penalized, will be fined, could possibly even face jail time. What's Cosatu's stance on that?
So look, we need to consider the issue of sanctions and jail time. I don't think we want to see anybody going to prison. But I think for us, the critical thing is those things can be dealt with in the bill and the regulations. Is it really the right sanction? But I think for us, what is critical, what is sacrosanct, is that all learners must be in school. And we think it's correct to say learners must start attending from grade R, because that lays a positive foundation for grade 1. We have seen over time how learners who went to grade R were well prepared for grade 1, but learners who didn't go to and entered grade 1 for the first time in their life, often had not even having attended educare or creches, really struggle. So it is a correct position. It means the department must put in place the necessary resources and personnel and facilities at all schools to make sure that they have grade R facilities, qualified teachers. So it's a positive thing for us. But of course, teachers can do so much. Parents must take responsibility for their children. They must make sure they're prepared for school, that they attend school, that they do their homework and so on, because teachers cannot be the parents in place of the parents. The parents have to take responsibility. We know not all parents have the resources and the space. They're working long hours. But if you want to have children, then we must take responsibility for our children, because this is also going to benefit parents when their children get a good education, find good jobs, and are able to take care of the parents in their old age.
Well, I appreciate you speaking to me about this. Matthew Parks, of course, Cosatu's Parliamentary Liason Officer, speaking there about the oral submissions that they will also be tabling before Parliament. We've heard from various parents, interest groups, political parties, of course, bringing in their input with regards to the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. What is yours? Perhaps you can share that with us as well on @ENCA. Any submissions that you would like to make, comments publicly so when it comes to this amendment bill tabled by the Basic Education.